I never thought I'd meet someone who could see right through me on the worst night of my life. But Jake somehow knew I was breaking apart before I even said a word. It was a Tuesday in March when everything changed. I was 26, working the night shift at Mercy General Hospital as a patient transporter. Not exactly the career I'd dreamed about in college, but after dropping out of my nursing program, it paid the bills while I figured out what came next. The job was simple, mindless even. Move patients from their rooms to imaging, from surgery to recovery, from one floor to another. I liked the simplicity of it. No real decisions to make, no one depending on me for anything critical. Just me, a wheelchair or gurney, and the fluorescent-lit hallways of a hospital that never slept. Jake had been my shift partner for about 3 months by that point. We'd been paired together after the previous guy quit without notice, and honestly, I wasn't thrilled about it at first. Jake was everything I wasn't. Confident, effortlessly charming, always ready with a joke that could make even the grumpiest nurse crack a smile. He had this way of moving through the world like he belonged everywhere he went. Dark hair that fell just slightly too long over his forehead, these impossibly warm brown eyes, and a smile that could light up the entire 4th floor. I kept my distance initially because guys like Jake usually made me nervous. Not because I didn't like them, but because I liked them too much, and that was a door I'd kept firmly locked since high school. We developed an easy rhythm, though. He'd take the odd-numbered floors, I'd take the even ones. We'd meet in the break room around 2 in the morning for coffee that tasted like battery acid and whatever snacks we'd brought from home. Jake always brought these elaborate meals his mom made, Tupperware containers filled with pasta or curry, or these incredible sandwiches on homemade bread. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there with a protein bar and an apple, feeling like a college kid who never learned to take care of himself. He'd always offer me half of whatever he had, and I'd always refuse, and he'd always leave it on the table between us anyway until I eventually gave in. We talked about surface things mostly. Sports, movies, the weird stuff we'd see during our shifts. Like the time we transported a guy who'd gotten a toy car stuck somewhere it definitely shouldn't have been, or the elderly woman who propositioned Jake while he was wheeling her to X-ray. We laughed a lot during those breaks, and I started looking forward to them more than I wanted to admit. Started paying attention to little things like the way Jake's eyes crinkled at the corners when he really laughed, or how he'd absently roll up his sleeves when he got warm, revealing these surprisingly muscular forearms. But we never talked about anything real. I didn't tell him about my brother Marcus, about how I'd basically raised him after our dad left, and our mom started working double shifts to keep us afloat. Didn't mention that Marcus was only 22 but already struggling with addiction, in and out of rehab, breaking my heart a little more each time he relapsed. Didn't say that I'd chosen this dead-end job, partly because the overnight hours meant I could check on Marcus during the day, make sure he was still breathing, still trying. And I definitely didn't tell Jake that sometimes I'd catch myself staring at him when he wasn't looking, wondering what it would feel like to be someone who could just exist openly, who didn't spend every interaction carefully monitoring every word and gesture for anything that might give away the truth I'd been hiding since I was 15. That Tuesday started like any other. I got to the hospital at 10:45, changed into my scrubs in the locker room, and headed to the transport office to check the schedule. Jake was already there, leaning against the desk with his phone in his hand, and when he saw me, his whole face brightened in that way that made my stomach do uncomfortable things. "Hey man," he said, pocketing his phone. "Ready for another thrilling night of wheeling people around?" "Living the dream," I replied, grabbing my radio and badge. "What's the count tonight?" 47 scheduled transports, plus whatever emergencies come up. Should be a fun one. We split up the list like always, and I headed to the 6th floor for my first pickup. It was a routine transport, an elderly man heading to CT scan, and he spent the entire elevator ride telling me about his grandchildren. I made the appropriate noises, smiled at the right moments, but my mind was elsewhere. Marcus had called me that morning, sounding off. Not high exactly, but not sober either. That in-between space that worried me more than anything, because it meant he was thinking about using, standing on that edge, trying to decide which way to fall. I'd promised to come by his apartment after my shift, make sure he was okay. He'd said not to worry, that he was fine, but Marcus always said he was fine right before everything fell apart. The night crawled forward, transport after transport, floor after floor. I saw Jake a few times in passing, always with that easy smile, always pausing to crack a joke or ask how I was holding up. Around 1:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I was in the middle of moving a post-op patient back to her room, so I couldn't check it, but something in my chest tightened. An instinct, maybe. A premonition. When I finally got the patient settled and stepped into the hallway, I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from my mom. My hands went cold. Mom never called me during work unless something was wrong. I found an empty family waiting room and called her back, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. She answered on the first ring. Danny. Just my name, but the way she said it, I knew. I knew before she said anything else. It's Marcus, she said, and her voice was this broken thing I'd never heard before. Baby, I'm so sorry, he's gone. The world tilted sideways. I had to sit down, my legs just gave out, and I found myself on one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs they put in hospital waiting rooms. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was surrounded by people fighting to stay alive, and my brother had just lost that fight. What happened? I managed to ask. Overdose, Mom said, and she was crying now, these horrible gasping sobs. His roommate found him an hour ago. They tried Danny. The paramedics tried, but he was already gone. I don't remember what else she said. Something about the hospital they'd taken him to, about arrangements that needed to be made, about how sorry she was. I sat there holding the phone long after she'd hung up, staring at the beige wall in front of me, feeling absolutely nothing and everything all at once. I should have gone home, should have told my supervisor what happened, clocked out, gone to my mom's house or to the morgue or anywhere but there. But I couldn't move, couldn't think. My radio crackled with another transport request, and somehow I stood up, somehow I responded, somehow I went back to work like my entire world hadn't just shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I must have looked terrible because the nurse who handed me the next patient's chart actually asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just tired, and she accepted that because nurses in a busy hospital don't have time to dig deeper. I transported the patient, a middle-aged woman with a broken hip, and she talked the entire time about her garden and her cat and her daughter who was visiting from Seattle. I made sounds that might have been words, and she didn't seem to notice that I was somewhere else entirely. Jake found me in the basement hallway around 2:15. I was just standing there, staring at nothing, and I didn't even hear him approach until he said my name. Danny? His voice was soft, concerned. Hey, you missed break. You okay? I turned to look at him, and whatever he saw in my face made his expression shift immediately from casual concern to something deeper. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out like he wanted to touch my arm, but wasn't sure if he should. What happened? He asked. And that's when I broke. Just completely fell apart in a basement hallway at 2 a.m, with Jake standing there watching me crumble. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe, and the tears came so fast and hard that I couldn't see. I felt Jake's arms around me before I consciously registered him moving, pulling me against his chest, one hand on the back of my head and the other wrapped around my shoulders. It's okay, he murmured, and his voice was so gentle it made me cry harder. I've got you. Whatever it is, I've got you. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough that someone probably walked by and saw us, but I couldn't bring myself to care. When I finally got enough air in my lungs to speak, the words tumbled out in this broken, gasping rush. My brother, Marcus, he's dead. Overdose. He's dead, Jake. He's gone. Jake's arms tightened around me. Oh God, Danny, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He didn't let go, didn't pull away or act uncomfortable or do any of the things I'd expected. He just held me while I fell apart, and when I finally managed to stop crying, he kept one arm around my shoulders and guided me to the break room. Sit, he said, and I did, collapsing into one of the plastic chairs. He disappeared for a minute and came back with a bottle of water and a box of tissues from somewhere. Then he pulled his chair right next to mine, so close our knees were almost touching, and looked at me with these eyes full of concern and something else I couldn't quite name. Tell me what you need, he said simply. I don't know. My voice came out hoarse, wrecked. I should go home. I should be with my mom. I don't know what I should do. Do you want to leave? Because I can cover your transports. All of them. I'll tell the supervisor you had a family emergency. I shook my head. I can't. If I leave, if I go home, then it's real. If I stay here, if I just keep working, maybe I can. I don't know. I just can't leave yet. Jake nodded like that made perfect sense, even though it didn't. Okay, then we'll get through the rest of the shift together. I'll take your calls. You can take mine, or we can do them together. Whatever you need. You don't have to do that. I know, he said. I want to. And he did. For the rest of that shift, Jake stayed with me. He picked up every single one of my transports, telling the supervisor he was training me on a new protocol so we needed to work together. It was a transparent lie, but the supervisor was too busy to question it. We moved through the hospital side by side, Jake doing all the heavy lifting while I just followed in a daze. He talked to the patients, joked with the nurses, handled everything while I existed in this fog of grief and shock. And when we had a free moment, he'd check on me with just a look, this silent question, asking if I was still holding together. Around 4 a.m, we ended up in a rarely used stairwell on the 7th floor, sitting on the steps between transports. Jake had his radio turned up loud so we wouldn't miss any calls, but for the moment, everything was quiet. Tell me about him, Jake said softly. About Marcus. And I did. I told him everything. About how Marcus had been this bright, creative kid who drew these amazing comic book characters and wanted to be an animator. About how he'd started using when he was 17 after a knee injury got him prescribed painkillers. About the years of watching him spiral, the failed rehab attempts, the promises to get clean that never stuck. About how I'd felt like I was drowning trying to save him, and how I'd failed anyway. Jake listened to all of it without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes or trying to make it better. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You didn't fail him. Addiction is a disease, Danny. You can't love someone out of it, no matter how hard you try." I should have done more. You did everything you could. I can tell just from listening to you. You loved him, and he knew that. That matters. I looked at Jake then, really looked at him, and saw tears in his eyes. "Why are you being so nice to me?" I asked. "We barely know each other." He smiled, this sad, gentle thing. "Because you're not as good at hiding as you think you are. I've known for a while that you were carrying something heavy. I just didn't know what. And because..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone with something, to think you have to handle everything by yourself." Something in his tone made me ask, "What are you carrying?" Jake looked down at his hands. "That's a conversation for another time. Tonight is about you and what you need." We sat there in silence for a while, and then Jake did something I'll never forget. He reached over and took my hand, just laced his fingers through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. My breath caught, and he must have felt me tense because he started to pull away. "Sorry, I just thought..." "Don't," I said quickly, gripping his hand tighter. "Don't let go." He didn't. We sat there holding hands in that stairwell until the radio crackled with another transport request, and even then, Jake squeezed my hand once before letting go, like he was telling me something without words. We made it through the rest of the shift. Dawn was breaking when we finally clocked out, the sky turning pink and gold outside the hospital windows. Jake walked me to my car in the parking garage, and when we got there, he pulled me into another hug. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "Eventually, maybe." I stepped back, suddenly aware of how much I'd revealed, how vulnerable I'd been. "Thank you, Jake, for everything. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupted. "And Danny, I'm here, not just tonight. Whenever you need someone, I'm here. Okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. "Put your number in. I want to check on you." I did, and he immediately sent me a text, so I'd have his number too. Then he said, "Go be with your family. Take whatever time you need. I'll cover your shifts." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Go, Danny." I drove to my mom's house as the sun came up, and when I got there, she fell into my arms the same way I'd fallen into Jake's. We cried together, made phone calls, started the terrible process of planning a funeral for someone who should have had his whole life ahead of him. Jake texted me that afternoon, just a simple message asking how I was doing, telling me he was thinking of me, I responded with something short, and he didn't push, just let me know he was there. He texted every day after that, never demanding responses, just sending little messages of support. I took a week off work, the longest week of my life, filled with funeral arrangements and relatives I hadn't seen in years, and the unbearable reality of saying goodbye to Marcus. Jake came to the funeral. I hadn't asked him to, hadn't even told him when it was, but he showed up anyway. He sat in the back of the church, and when it was over and people were offering their condolences, he waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said. "How did you know when it was?" "I asked around at the hospital. People talk." He paused. "I wanted to be here for you." My mom appeared at my elbow then, her eyes red-rimmed but curious. "Danny, who's your friend?" "This is Jake. We work together. Jake, this is my mom, Linda." Mom looked between us, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "Thank you for coming," she said to Jake, "and thank you for being there for my son. He told me how you helped him that night." "Of course," Jake said simply. "Danny's important to me." The way he said it, the weight behind those words, made my heart skip. Mom noticed too. I could see it in her face, this understanding, and when Jake excused himself to give us space, she squeezed my hand. "He seems like a good man," she said carefully. "He is." "Danny." She turned to face me fully. "I've always known, sweetheart, about you, and I just want you to know that whoever you are, whoever you love, I'm proud of you. Your father's mistakes, his prejudices, they're not mine, okay?" I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I just hugged her, and she held me like she used to when I was small and the world felt too big and scary. I went back to work the following week. Jake was there when I arrived for my first shift back, and his face lit up when he saw me. "Welcome back," he said. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." We fell back into our routine, but something had changed. The walls I'd built so carefully around myself had cracks in them now, and Jake seemed to know exactly where they were. He'd catch my eye across a crowded hallway and smile, this private thing just for me. He'd find excuses to work together even when we didn't need to. And our 2 a.m. break times became longer, deeper conversations where I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. 3 weeks after Marcus died, during one of those late-night breaks, Jake told me his story about coming out to his family when he was 19 and his father refusing to speak to him for 2 years. About his mom who'd eventually come around but still struggled with it. About feeling like he had to be perfect at everything else to make up for this one thing about himself that he couldn't change. "That's why I recognized it in you," he said. "That weight of hiding. I wore it for a long time too. You're so confident now though, so comfortable with who you are. Took a lot of work to get here, and honestly, meeting someone like you, someone who's still figuring it out, it reminds me how far I've come. But also, how lonely that journey can be when you're doing it alone." "I'm not alone anymore," I said quietly. "Am I?" Jake reached across the table and took my hand, right there in the break room where anyone could walk in. "No, Danny, you're not alone." We started spending time together outside of work. Movies, dinner, long drives with no destination. Jake never pushed, never demanded anything I wasn't ready to give. He just existed beside me, steady and patient, while I slowly learned to let him in. 2 months after that terrible Tuesday, we were at Jake's apartment watching a movie neither of us was paying attention to. I was hyper-aware of how close we were sitting, how his arm was stretched across the back of the couch behind me, how easy it would be to just lean into him. "Danny," Jake said softly, and when I turned to look at him, his face was inches from mine. "I need to tell you something." "Okay, I'm falling for you. Actually, I've probably been falling for you since way before that night, but I didn't want to complicate things when you were grieving. But I can't keep pretending this is just friendship, not anymore." My heart was racing so fast I thought it might explode. "Jake, you don't have to say anything back," he continued. "I just needed you to know. And if you don't feel the same way, we can forget I said anything. I value your friendship too much to lose it." I kissed him, just leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, clumsy and nervous and probably terrible. But Jake made this sound, this soft exhale of relief, and kissed me back like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and Jake was smiling so wide it made me smile too. "I've wanted to do that for so long," I admitted. "Yeah? Yeah, I was just scared." "Of what?" "Of everything. Of being myself. Of wanting this. Of losing Marcus and thinking that meant I didn't deserve to be happy. But you." I touched his face, still amazed that I was allowed to do this. "You make me want to be brave." "You're already brave, Danny. You've been brave through everything. This is just you finally letting yourself have something good." We spent that whole night talking, kissing, learning the shape of each other. Jake told me about his dreams of going back to school to become a nurse, and I told him about my abandoned plans, about how maybe it wasn't too late to try again. We made plans, tentative and hopeful, about a future that suddenly seemed possible. Marcus's death taught me that life is fragile and unpredictable, and sometimes unbearably cruel. But it also taught me that in the darkest moments, someone might reach out their hand and refuse to let you fall alone. Jake was that person for me. He saw me breaking and held me together. He covered my shifts and held my hand and showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can offer another person. We still work together at Mercy General. We still take our 2 a.m. breaks, but now Jake sits close enough that our shoulders touch, and sometimes he'll lean over and kiss my temple when no one's looking. We're not hiding anymore, and that freedom is sweeter than I ever imagined. I think about Marcus every day. The grief hasn't disappeared, probably never will, but it's softer now, less sharp. I visit his grave every week, tell him about my life, about Jake, about how I'm trying to be the person he always believed I could be. And I think he'd be happy for me. I think he'd like Jake. I think he'd tell me it's about damn time I let myself be happy. Sometimes the worst nights of our lives crack us open in ways that let the light in. That Tuesday in March broke me, but it also broke down walls I'd been building for over a decade. It brought Jake into my life in a way that shallow work friendship never could have. It showed me that I'm stronger than I thought, and that asking for help isn't giving up, it's choosing to survive. I'm back in school now, retaking those nursing classes I'd abandoned. Jake and I moved in together last month, and his mom made us a care package with homemade bread and a note saying she's proud of both of us. My mom comes over for dinner every Sunday, and she and Jake have become thick as thieves, conspiring together to embarrass me at every opportunity. Life isn't perfect. I still have hard days where the grief feels overwhelming, but I have Jake now, and he has me, and we face those hard days together. And on the good days, which are becoming more frequent, we laugh and dream and build something beautiful out of the pieces of who we used to be. That terrible Tuesday was the worst night of my life. But it was also the night I learned that love shows up in unexpected places, in hospital hallways and basement stairwells, in the gentle hands of someone who refuses to let you face your darkness alone. Jake covered for me that night, and in doing so, he uncovered parts of myself I'd been hiding for far too long, and I'm grateful for the pain that broke me open, for the love that put me back together, and for every moment in between that taught me what it means to truly be seen.